Skydiving. This is amazing.
Yeah, but you know what else is amazing? An iPhone 6S for just $49 at Metro.
Really?
Imagine streaming all the way down with that amazing camera. I'm switching.
That's smart.
You know what else is smart? Parachutes.
Switch to Metro and get an amazing iPhone 6S for only $49. Metro by T-Mobile. Phone offer requires port-in of number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio.
Uncle Jassinib, 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 Uncle Jassinib. Uncle Jassinib, 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 Uncle Jassinib. Uncle Jassinib, 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 Uncle Jassinib. Uncle Jassinib, 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 Uncle Jassinib. Uncle Jassinib, 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 Uncle Jassinib. Uncle Jassinib, 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 Uncle Jassinib.
Petapu, Alafia Jumbo, peace and love to everyone. We welcome you once again to another show of Rockseki Radio. This is Moot Kajara, and I am here with my sisters Aura and Sakira. Peace and love, sisters.
Peace and love, Petapu. Peace and love.
Peace. It's good to hear you all this evening. And we welcome everyone again to the show. It's going to be a powerful show this evening. And, of course, we're going to start off with a prayer, as always. So I'm going to turn it over to you, sister.
Yes, dua. Dua Shetsu. Mojumba Egungun. Dua Shetsu. Mojumba Egungun. Dua Shetsu. Mojumba Egungun. O ancestors, blacker than 1,000 midnights, African ancestors, it is we, your children, that give you respect and honor. O ancestors, we call upon you and welcome you in this place. African ancestors, let your presence fill this place. O ancestors, who have been purposely excluded from the history books so that the world would not know of your greatness. Our African ancestors who gave civilization to the world. Our African ancestors who gave the arts to the world. Our African ancestors who gave music to the world. Our African ancestors who gave the sciences to the world. Our African ancestors who gave mathematics to the world. Our African ancestors who gave medicine to the world. Our African ancestors who gave literature to the world. Our African ancestors who gave philosophy to the world. Our African ancestors who gave God consciousness to the world. O ancestors, we thank you for devoting your lives to make a future for us, your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Now stand with us, strengthen us, guide us, teach us, and protect us from the snare of our enemies. Rise up, O African ancestors, and let our enemies be scattered. Give us the wisdom and boldness to stand up to our oppressors and those who would hinder the liberation and empowerment of our people. Rise up, O African ancestors, and live in us. We will not fail to honor you. We will not fail to respect you. We will not fail to hear you, and we will not betray you. Ashe, 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 Dua Shetsu, Mojumba Egungun, Dua. Dua, and Ashe, Ashe. All right. Well, how are you all doing this evening? I know you got a lot going on over there, Sister Aura. How's the vibe?
I am just got finished with a very, very intense birth. It's beautiful. The baby's good. The baby's healthy. It's a boy with a warrior spirit born on Thursday. And came out eyes wide open and, you know, is paying very close attention to everything. Mom, Dad, they're bonding right now, so I had to steal a quiet space in the hospital. So I am feeling great. I'm feeling great. You know, it's stormy weather over here, but it's cleansing. It's powerful. This place is popping over here because the word on the whole wing is that, you know, it just seems like the storm just blew in a whole bunch of births. So, which is a beautiful thing. So I'm grateful. I'm energized. I'm too energized by the birth. I should be tired, but because I only got probably like 2 hours of broken sleep the whole maybe 24, 36 hours, but I'm feeling great and so glad to be here for tonight. So.
Wow. That's beautiful. Wow. I'm doing good. That's exciting. That's very exciting. It's storming over here, too, in Florida. It stopped, but we did get a serious downpour, which is bringing in a nice little cold front. Wow. So congratulations on the birth. That's beautiful. That's a long labor.
Yeah. The labor itself was probably just a little more than 24 hours. She started laboring, say, about 6:30. Actually, it was like about 25 hours or so. And I got word that, probably a couple of hours after that. And even still, she was first-time mom, and she was a trooper. I asked, I said, do you need me to come over? And she was like, no, I got this for right now. But, Spirit was like, I had all this stuff lined up, what I was going to do, and it was like, no, you need to rearrange your schedule and just rest. And I'm glad that I listened, but, I couldn't really get into a deep rest, so I just kind of rested, but I didn't sleep. But as soon as I was about to go to sleep, finally, that's when I got the call, like, just come on. So, it was on. I was on from there on. So, but yeah, it's an honor to be a part of the process. So, I'm grateful.
That is such a divine time to bring a life into the world or to witness and be a part of that. And so we definitely send you some love and energy, and to the family and the new baby. We surround them in divine love. Oh, it's so nice. Another Thursday born.
I mean, he a big boy, too. Broad shoulders, big hands, long toes.
And we could talking about the babies, but
talking about the babies. I'm talking about the babies.
Yes, that's always a beautiful conversation. We love the babies. And that is going to bring us right into this show tonight, because we are talking about relationships and building healthy relationships so that when the babies come into the world, they are coming into a safe and secure family home situation. And, we are always promoting health and wellness, and we have to promote the health of our families. So it's definitely an honor and a blessing to have our guests with us this evening. And Mwalimu Baruti is one that I have been aware of and connected to for many, many years, because I have been a part of the Atlanta community. And so he is the co-founder and director of the Afrikanb Institute. Mwalimu Baruti is the teacher who has been teaching over the last decade. His institute has offered, evening and online courses. It's an independent, African-centered, full-time and after-school homeschooling and tutorial program for middle and high school students. And they have been doing this for 17 years. Mwalimu Baruti received his graduate training at the University of Chicago and has taught at Morehouse and Chicago State University. He has been the keynote speaker, the guest lecturer, and moderator for forums, programs, and activities in numerous places around the country and the world. His lecture topics have ranged from the character of African manhood and warriorhood, male and female relationships, European sexual insanity, interracial coupling, to the Middle Passage, and he has also authored 21 self-published books, of which Sovereignty and Remembrance and Clarity, The Remembrance, Reality, and Visions are the latest. He is currently working on a manuscript titled African-Centered Education. Baba Baruti lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with his wife of over 30 years, Mama Mwalimu Baruti, who is the co-founder and co-director of the Afrikanb Institute. So it is a blessing and an honor to have Mwalimu Baruti with us this evening. Peace and love. Can you hear us, Baba Baruti?
Yes, I can, and I'm honored to be on. I've been listening to the conversation, and it's, you need to tell people who you're talking to and who you appreciate. Mr. Kajar, we've known you for years. I follow you, and I'm always honored to be in your presence. I mean, you're to me one of those humble giants that's a spiritual warrior in our community. We honor you greatly. It was very good to see you at the Malcolm X Fest not too long ago. It's been a little while, but it's wonderful to be invited and finally be on. And I'm listening to Sister Aura, who's talking about this baby, and I'm sitting here smiling because it's even though it's not super uncommon, it's not all that common for a doula to assist in bringing an ancestor back and being able to immediately see that she's looking into the eyes of a warrior. And that immediately brought a humongous smile to my face, and hopefully you get more than those 2 hours rest over the next 24, 48 hours, but our doulas need to be applauded too, and I'm very proud of those sisters who have decided to take on that responsibility. That's a challenge, and we often will. And I'm not trying to get on the sister side, but we often devalue, underrate the work that sisters put into making sure that we are here, making sure that families are good, families are safe, making sure that our children are taught and fed, and making sure that the brothers are not lost a lot of the time. So I'm honored to be on this program. I'm honored to have been invited in the first place and to talk on a topic that I'm not too sure if I'm as much as an expert as the two people who I'm going to be talking with this evening.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Dua, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm honored to be here. And any of y'all said your greeting.
Yes, I love you all and honor and respect you so much.
Absolutely.
So
Go both
thank
ways.
you.
Yes, we are truly grateful.
And I haven't finished reading the book, and that's not an excuse. I'm glad that I haven't finished it because it is something that I need to take my time with. So it is being read. I needed you to know it's being read. It's just being read at the slow pace that it should be read at.
All right, I received that. It's definitely not a book that you can just go through. You have to take your time with that one for sure. The Speaking with Spirit book, right?
Very true.
Mhm. Well, I look forward to hearing your thoughts about it when you are finished.
Okay, absolutely. I'm enjoying it. Well, I don't know if enjoy is the right word. I'm contemplating my way through it.
All right. And I know you all just had a big event there this past weekend. I'm sorry I missed it. How was that, the Kaduka?
It was fantastic. It's every year, like more and more people come. All of the mamas associated with Afrikanb Institute and beyond are involved. In fact, the mamas and it's primarily the mamas. It's interesting here that whenever there's an event, the annual fundraiser, or the K-Buka event, or whatever it is, the mamas handle it so that all of the vending, all of the food, all of the chairs, all the space, all of the everything is taken care of. So it makes it a lot easier for me. All I have to do is go up and discuss what needs to be discussed. The Babas took care of the streaming and the recording. The children did an incredible job, and a truly incredible job. The applause was long for them from the community. There was standing room only in a space that is owned by us, and I've heard no complaints. I've heard from people who are giving this deep thought. The goal, if I may say so, the goal of this is the 10th annual. This was the 10th annual Kebuka lecture, which is my favorite lecture of the years, based on the book I wrote called Kebuka, which was even though it's the smallest, it was the most difficult book for me to write. And in fact, when I finished writing it, I ended up unable to walk. My nervous system gave out for 3 weeks. I wasn't able to walk. I was laying across a coffee table on a pillow, and I was out of the classroom for 3 months. And the elder sister said, well, the ancestors, they carried you to make sure that this was written, and then they let you go to recover on your own. But this was the most difficult and painful book to write, and I did it because I need for us to feel what our ancestors went through, the numbers and the names and the places. That's important, but if you don't feel it, then, I mean, it's meaningless. It's gone in a few days or what have you, and the impact doesn't compel you to do the kind of work that needs to be done. But this year, we moved forward, and there was a brother who had attempted something similar to this over a number of years, a few years ago. But we need to have a day minimum, but we can start with a day where for that 24 hours we spend our time thinking about the ancestors who were captured, who marched in the coffin lines, who were in the dungeons, who were the slavers, who arrived here, and hold some honor, give some honor to them. And I know people are doing this, but it needs to be larger than this. This needs to be all of us doing this. And I was reading a good number of years ago that in the Japanese people, they have, I believe it's an hour. It might be 4 hours, but I believe it's an hour of complete and total silence. Japanese around the world, a complete and total silence on the day that the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in honor of those ancestors. And we as a people don't have that. That we need to create that without anybody else's validation, without anybody else's permission. We need to decide that we are going to do that. So the theme for us, for Enia, I, a number of other people, was to begin whatever process is necessary to turn this into an international day of remembrance for our ancestors. So as folks have spread the word, whatever Saturday is closest to the 15th of November, that's going to be the day that is designated for that. And if it's just 30 or 300 of us, then it'll just be 30 or 300 of us, but we're going to observe that day of remembrance for our ancestors. And the event was beautiful. It really reflected that. It did what it was supposed to do. It got people to think and to understand and to feel.
I say. Well, I'm glad I asked about that. We had a show last night about our own holidays, so I'm very glad that you mentioned, because we should have a day to recognize our ancestors. So I'm going to list that one on our list. You said November 15th?
Whatever Saturday is closest to that. Whatever the closest Saturday is to November the 15th. Now I didn't give it enough thought. So if that Saturday, it could be whatever Saturday is closest to the 15th is the day that we decided.
All right. Well, if you let us know, for 2016, and then we're going to add it to our calendar, and then, also see if we can join you all in that day and honoring that day.
Oh, that'd be beautiful. We, of course, would love that to no end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we're spread around. The good things in our community are spread by word of mouth. And I'm glad that you all did that. Not to stay on the subject. NEI for years here with the students has had them, one of their essay assignments, really a social science project, but one of their essay assignments, they had to create an African holiday and to describe, to name it, to describe what it was about, to explain how it was to be celebrated. That was one of their projects to get them thinking in that direction. And, of course, every European holiday, every holiday that's celebrated by Europeans, by the West, is critiqued here. So we're moving, of course, obviously along the same lines in terms of defining ourselves for ourselves, empowering ourselves for ourselves, not letting anyone else name us, not letting anyone decide who we should celebrate, when we should celebrate it, and how we should celebrate it.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know our listeners are very interested in the topic, so we're going to go ahead and move to that.
Okay.
So wherever you want to start, Father,
Okay.
We would love to hear about the book. And
okay. And, I said, stop me when you will. I have no problem with that. We're going to be talking about complementarity. Complementarity, of course, is one of the, I like to say, principles, guidelines of Ma'at. These are, of course, fundamental rules that define and, regulate the universe. And these are the principles that our ancestors discovered, if you will, when they studied the universe, when they studied the skies, when they studied life on this planet, when they studied this planet, when they studied the Satya to figure out the kind of people they should make themselves into, if you will. And complementarity was one of those principles. It's one of those principles that speaks to order, and it speaks to balance, it speaks to reciprocity. And we talk about complementarity, we're talking about the relationship between a man and a woman in terms of a relationship that creates family, a relationship that creates intimate ties between those two. We're talking about the relationship that exists in a community, and without that relationship, there is no community. And we can look around today and we can see the devastation in our community that is a result of the assault against complementarity and the assault against our families. We are at war. Mama Rimba would say we are being warred on. But we are at war, and of all of the institutions that we have historically had as a people, and every people has institutions of politics and education and religion, economics, military for those who survive, and family structure. But the one that has been assaulted the most among African people is that of family. But of course, it speaks to our resilience as a people and our love of family. Writers have always said that African people are very family-centered, very child-centered people, but it speaks to our resilience as a people, which I think is our strongest quality as a people, our ability to get knocked down and get back up, and get knocked down and get back up, and get knocked down and get back up again. And I think resilience is our strongest quality, and it's a statement about the resilience of our African family that we're still trying. That there are more extended families within our community globally than any other people on the planet. As badly as we have been beaten, that should have been through. That should have been over. But of course, we have to look around and be very careful and cautious while we're talking about these positive qualities, knowing that as Curtis Mayfield says so well, the hunt is on, and brother, you're the prey. I say the hunt is on, and family, you're the prey. So we have to be very, very careful in this process of talking about what we are good at. And this is something that we're good at, and we're good at this for a reason. I don't necessarily want to, I guess, get so much into the reason because we can spend forever with this, but I think it has a lot to do with the type of quality of character, or the quality of character that Africans socialize, that is, I would argue, genetically passed on within African people, even though it still has to be socialized and trained in there, because African people are very big traditionally on the development of character. So it's like when you look at relationships between warriors, or relationships that can occur between a male and a female warrior, when they are assessing finding a complement, finding a mate, if you will, finding someone to build family with, then the first consideration is the consideration of obligation. I'm trying to think of a word right now. It's not about dating per se. It's about commitment. So when we're looking for relationships, even though of course we enjoy ourselves and we see each other, we love each other, and we love the way we look at, but at baseline, when warriors are searching for each other and they become engaged, if you will, then it's based on commitment, not on play, and that speaks to a particular type of character. It speaks to a particular type of character. It speaks to being African, where the seriousness of the situation is understood. The seriousness of finding a complement is understood. The understanding of the importance of bringing family into existence with a purpose is important. And I want to read real quick the statement on the back of the book Complimentarity, which I like and people seem to like in terms of it being a description of what the couple is about. So the couple is the bedrock of the nation. Without it, there is no family, no people. Without couples, there can be no family to procreate and rear confident, untroubled, anchored children. No viable, community-respecting generation can be born to continue the process of life, living, building, and defending without that. African couples must be whole, individually and as one. They must be able to trust themselves and each other implicitly. And that is what makes it imperative that we carefully choose our mates for African reasons. We must choose with vision, for we are the vanguard. Our unions have purpose far greater than the wants or needs of either member individually or the couple together. We do not bemoan this privilege. In fact, it is just the opposite. We are soldiers in love with forming beautiful families, rearing happy, thinking children, building strong, lasting communities, raising a mighty nation, and removing all enemies. For African warrior scholar compliments, there is no other reason for being. And I can't overemphasize how important family, compliments, family, and children are in our tradition. And if we're trying to be African, then that's what's important for us. We get lost in Western arguments because it's easier. We get lost in Western arguments that say that tradition is old, archaic, outdated, outmoded, that stuff is by God, we need to create something new. No, tradition is what over thousands and thousands of years came to work for us based upon our cultural personality, based upon our vision of nationhood, based upon our vision of family, based upon our economic understanding of reality, based upon everything. The tradition is what worked for us. And what continues to work for us, as long as we recognize that we're African, we get lost in other people's culture in terms of these relationships. And in terms of complementarity, our tradition, there are many aspects of our tradition. I can talk about several of them in terms of us getting a better description of what we are. We can look at this two ways. We can either look at the African tradition and contrast it with the European tradition or Yoruba tradition, or we can just look at our tradition. And tonight, I just want to look at our tradition. The birth of this baby boy has made me not want to really get into things that are negative. I pretty much want to only focus on the positive. Keep it right tonight in terms of what we're talking about. So our tradition, we don't talk about compliments. Opposites attract. We talk about compliments attract, which is a whole different mentality. Because it's like when we are talking to prospective couples, and the first piece of advice that we give is that you need to first find out what's wrong with you, find out what your faults are, find out what you're not good at. Of course, you are complete and whole in and of yourself, but find out those things that you're not good at. My mother sent me this poster when I was whining in graduate school, and it simply says half of being smart is knowing what you're dumb at, and that's very similar to the question that I have for folks when they're considering relationship, because in the complementary way, you're supposed to look for that which you're not good at, so that you can, if you will, augment, so you can add to yourself, so you can add something meaningful. So when you look at the end product, if you will, of these two people, you have something that is stronger, not just something that's working together, but something that is stronger because they both brought things to the table that the other one wasn't good at or wasn't proficient at. And I'll talk about domains, and India doesn't particularly care for me using that word, but it really fit what I saw when I was growing up as a little boy who didn't know I was growing up in an African home. And my parents weren't radical or revolutionary, but the traditions and the habits and the character that they exhibited and put forth was African. I don't think that they really connected it with Africa, but it was African. And as a child, I never understood, a little boy, being brought up in this patriarchal world, I never understood why my father, who was career military, brought home his check every 2 weeks, and of course, back then, I didn't know one black adult who only had one job. Everybody had multiple jobs. So even though my mother was her primary job was rearing her two sons, she also sewed, she also babysat, she also sold Tupperware. She had a whole collection of jobs. But I never understood as a child why my father would come home and hand my mother his check. And then on top of that, to make matters worse, she would give him an allowance every week for him to spend on whatever it was, I guess lunch or what have you, but she would, well, it wasn't lunch because he was taking his lunch. She would give him an allowance every week out of what he had given her. And I'm like, okay, this isn't making a whole lot of sense. He's bringing home the money, and she's giving him an allowance from this money, and it's his money. You know, technically, I said I was a child, little child. Later, of course, I came to understand why he did that, because he knew what he was good at and what he wasn't good at. My mother was able to go down and buy a Volkswagen Super Beetle, I believe it was 72, with cash. She was able to pay off a 20-year mortgage in 11 years. I mean, you know, all kinds of financial things. She was a wizard with money, and he, like me, didn't have the didn't have the discipline to hold on to cash and do the right things with it. And he knew that she was good at it, and he wasn't. So he put it in the hands of someone else, who, of course, brings up the issue of trust, which is primary and any complimentary relationship as far as I'm concerned. So I always say to folks, in terms of them having discussions with me about trust, if you don't trust who you're with, you need to be with somebody else, because that's supposed to be the foundation of the relationship. And if you can't trust that person, you have some serious issues. But it's like that has gone on intergenerationally, if you will, in terms of me. So now I know that I'm not good with money. I know that I'm not good with money. I recognize that fault. So when I receive money, it immediately goes to EDI because she can work miracles with it. So we have to come into these relationships assessing what we're not good at, and also assessing also what we are good at, because we don't want to necessarily duplicate that. There's going to be some overlap, but we don't want to duplicate it so that what that person is bringing to the table is the same thing that we're bringing to the table, because that's not going to produce anything better. So we have to look at that, and when we say complements attract versus opposites attract, which is a whole different mentality. That's a warring mentality between two people. Complements attract is you finding somebody who you can work with, not somebody who you can battle with. And we have to learn as adults to respect, to honor, to praise, to get along with someone else's domain, someone else's, the areas that they are experts in, and allow them to make those decisions in those areas, just like they allow you to make the decisions in the areas that you are in. And, of course, that could become a whole discussion in terms of how things are divided up in this home. But the respect component is very important. That's a problem a lot of people have in the West. A lot of Africans socialized in the West have that issue because of the ego-driven personality in the West. The ego is the most important thing, me, I. So you can't admit when you're wrong, and you can't allow anyone else to be an expert in any area, because you have to be an expert in everything, even when you know nothing about it. So that right there is very destructive in complementary relationships. We have to talk about those things that need to be removed, that we need to cleanse ourselves of, and one of them is that ego, and that doesn't mean that you disappear. It just means that you're willing to share. You're willing to share space. You're willing to share power. You're willing to share a vision with someone versus it has to be yours and can only be yours. And as I said before, another one of those priorities is a commitment priority. While we're in relationships, we play, but play isn't the priority. That isn't what we are about, to see who we can play with. And as people are bringing up their children, and even now, I think one of the things we do at Afrikanb, there are lots of discussions about what you're looking for in a compliment, so that when people get to the point where they are seriously looking for a compliment, they have identified what they're good at, what they're not good at. They have identified a complimentary relationship as a serious commitment, not as play, not as just running around dating whoever, whatever. And I don't want people to be confused. I'm not talking about you're supposed to be this sterile individual, and you find another sterile individual and you try to make it happen. No, I'm talking about the priority of coming together in the first place. That should be the priority, commitment. As African people, we also have to understand that it wasn't individuals that married. It was families that married. You just represented the families, respective families. And that was a very serious thing, where families investigated each other to make sure that there weren't any issues that they didn't want to have in their family, because you're bringing two families together. And we also have to get rid of a lot of the Eurocentric interpretation of that which is African, which serves their interests and turns us away from being African, like the idea of child brides in traditional African society, which is a lie. One of the things that you will see if you study marital relationships with a traditional African society is that the young lady, the girl, could be asked for a hand, but she had the right to say no. That wasn't decided by her parents or grandparents or the community. She had the right to say no. I don't want to be with that individual, and that was the end of that discussion. And the power of women, which is another one of those other discussions in traditional African society, speaks to that by example. Well, I guess we do have to make a comparison. In traditional European society, you had the dowry. And the dowry spoke to the value of European females. You have to look at traditional European society where there was an interesting study that looked at medical care in traditional European society. And it did this thing that rank ordered who received the medical care the first on farms. And on farms, the man received the medical care first. The sons received the medical care second. The animals received the medical care third. And then came the mothers and the daughters. So we talk about the priority or the lack of priority, the insignificance of European women. You understand why the feminist movement came into existence in the first place. We can go back to Greece and Rome and talk about that. But we're not going to. So you had this dowry that was paid by the family to the man to marry their daughter to take her off of their hands. So they paid him to take her off of their hands. That's what dowry is. That's how dowry is defined in Webster's Collegiate also. Versus a bride price, if you will, and still that's European terminology, but a bride price on the continent where because of the economic asset, the economic power of women in traditional African society. In the traditional African society, African women controlled and worked more land than the men did. So much stuff we don't know. That this, for her to leave her family would be damaging to her family. So he had to demonstrate to them and to pay them, if you will, for the loss of their daughter. There's a major difference between a dowry and a bride price. And for African people, the value of women speaks to that, very much so. So that's going to be reflected in all things in society and all levels of society. So I'm not aware of any traditional African society where the girl did not have the right to say no. Also in traditional African society, when the husband died, then the brothers were obligated by law, and depending upon the society, whether it's the oldest brother or what have you, but the brothers were obligated by law to marry the sister, to marry the widow, to bring her into their home as family, as a wife. However, she had the right to say no. This is the part. That's always the part of the discussion that's left out. Okay? She had the right to say no. She wasn't just taken into that family against her will if she decided that she didn't want to be a part of that. So we just can't willy-nilly, if you will, talk about relationships, complementary relationships, or relationships between men and women globally if there aren't cultural differences, and these cultural differences aren't significant, and that we don't need to understand these significant differences if we're going to claim to be African, because we're supposed to be following the way of our ancestors. Our people, in terms of our complementarity, we were also, as I said before, we were family, child-centered. Those were the priorities. In some societies, it was well, I'll say all over. I was just talking to the students about this morning, where and really it came because we had two students who were I don't want to use the word dumb, but that was not very smart to come out their mouth to say that they didn't want to get married. And one of them said he didn't want to have children, and you really don't want to say that in front of any if you're claiming to be African. So she explained and went through and got quotes from a number of people about African marriage and family that talked about the importance of marriage to you becoming an adult in African society. That was one of the prerequisites for you having a family, for you to be defined as an adult. And of course, you had the choice of not getting married, which was few and far in between. But you had that choice. But if you made the choice not to get married, then you weren't a man. you were not considered a man in the eyes of the community, because we are very family, very child-centered. We understand that without children, we don't continue to exist, and we're talking about natural. We're not talking about manufactured stuff. We're not talking about the science, or quote-unquote science, that Europeans are coming up with in terms of manufacturing families and how they're defining it. We're talking about real, live, grassrooted, genetic families, and that's how we understand, because there's a connection between family and spirit, and just one aspect of that, which I ask folks to look at all the time. African people understand spirit as being transferred intergenerationally within a people. Europeans understand that we understand that. So part of the genocidal process is to kill people so that spirit has nowhere to return to. That's how deep it is for us in terms of the connection there between us and our children and their children and their children and their children. It's not just a biological function. There's also an underlying, all-pervasive, more powerful spiritual component. Also, in terms of African people, in terms of complementarity, happiness is much more important than pleasure. You still have to make these comparisons. Within European society, the priority is on pleasure. It's a sort of hedonistic culture, if you will, where you know that you're alive. You know that everything is good if there's pleasure involved. And pleasure is something that's ephemeral. It's very short-lived. And it has to be repeated over and over again, like a count in terms of a quantity, which fits, of course, their mindset, this counting of everything all the time. So for European, that's how or why within European society, sex has been misinterpreted as love. This is, you word things and you frame things in such a way that it fits your mentality. So more and more of us have come to equate sex with love, not with sex as being a manifestation of love or an expression of love, but sex itself. We're confused with that. And the younger children, they're even worse because it is a progressive degeneration of the definition of what love is. Of course, we have to look at the African definition of love, which Baba Fukiao talked about quite a bit, in saying that love didn't really exist, if you will, in African couples upon meeting. That was if you will, they weren't mature enough to even understand what that meant. So love was something that came as you grew with this person. As you came to understand their strengths and their weaknesses, you got to see them work through challenges with you. You got to understand that this person would live and die for you. That was when love came into existence. It's like the friends on Facebook. Okay, 99% of the people on there who are your quote unquote friends, you don't know them. Okay, but you're calling them friends because we have downgraded the definitions of such serious concepts, so that a friend is just somebody whose face, and that might not even be their face, whose face you happen to have seen and they like something on your page, or they ask you to be their friend. So this progressive degeneration of definitions like friendship and love and all the rest of this affects the definitions of relationships, the definitions of what making a promise to the Creator is supposed to be about. I mean, something really strange going on if the Creator is omnipotent and omniscient and can create life and take life and is omnipotent, all the rest of these things, and is everywhere, and you can say to the Creator, I will love you forever through sickness and health and all the rest of this good stuff, and then a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 later, you're not together anymore. And I'm saying it this way so that people understand, not that people did this, but that means that you lied to the Creator when you divorce, when you move apart, when you separate. You have to think about the magnitude of that. Okay? And I don't I don't know anybody personally who sat there and intentionally lied to the Creator, but you have to, if this was traditional African society, that would be considered a serious offense. That was one of the things that Fukiao Tedla, a number of people talked about in terms of marriage within African families, where you had a community of counselors. Okay, because the goal was to keep you all together, because you were now glue. You were now social glue. You were now cement within the community, and the community's job was to make it so it's easier for you to stay together. Because anybody who's been married for over a few years knows, as India says repeatedly, marriage is extremely hard. And I'll joke about it sometimes, how when she first started saying that, I was somewhat offended, because she would get up on stage and we're talking about complementarity, and she would say, it's hard like 4 or 5 times, and I'm like, wow, is she talking about me personally? And I came to understand later, that she was just trying to make the point, but she stopped saying it 3 or 4 times. Now she'll only say it 1 or 2 times. But still, the understanding of how difficult marriage is. I tell, and I know she tell the same thing, and I'm pretty sure anybody who's been married for 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or 15 years will tell you it's the hardest thing that you will ever do in your life, but it's the most important thing to me that you will ever do in your life. There's a reason why, and I'm jumping around now, but there's a reason why marriage has been so downplayed and beaten down and turned into something in our community that we don't want anymore. A significant number of us don't want anymore. And there's a reason why other people have guided us in this direction, because marriage, more than anything else in your life, will develop your inner strength, because you develop your inner strength, your discipline, through struggle. Okay? You get spiritual crisis, however you want to look at it. When you are married to somebody, that means that you are committed to the individual. That means that you're going to have to give up some of what you want. Give up some of what you're used to. Give up some of what you love in order to have balance in the relationship. If it's a balanced relationship, that requires discipline. It requires more and more discipline. And the more you struggle, the more you try to find this balance, that area that exists between you two, where you don't lose yourself, but you two gain each other. The more that you invest your time in that, trying to make that work, then the more disciplined you become. Our enemies do not want us disciplined. They want us as weak as is humanly possible. And removing marriage as a viable option is something for us to consider. Works to their advantage by not allowing us to reach heights of discipline that otherwise we might not reach. So in terms of that happiness and pleasure issue that I was talking about, African people are really happiness-centered. It's more about quality than about quantity. I have an uncle who calls every year or two, and he only speaks to me for a minute, and then he gets on the phone with Inia for an hour or so. But only thing he asks me is, "Are you happy?" He's not trying to find out if how my job is doing, or if I'm making such and such a money, or what kind of car I have, or whatever. What's the latest book or anything like that. He wants to know if I'm happy. That to me is patently African, because we're about being happy. Okay? Now the pleasure comes as a part of that in complementary relationships, but still the primary thing that we are searching for is happiness. That's our tradition. That's absolutely our tradition. So for me, when we're talking about our tradition, and we need to start all of our conversations about anything African in the context of the traditions out of which we come, because if we're not talking about it out of that, then we're talking about it out of somebody else's tradition. And we're Africans. So there's no other tradition, as far as I'm concerned, that should have any influence over how we interpret reality and how we understand the way that we need to be. As some of the elders say, to be African, or what Asa Hilliard said, to be African or not to be. So if we're not being African, then we're ceasing or have ceased to exist. If we're not who we are. Wade Noble said, if we're not passing on to our children the truth of who we are without compromise, then we have no character. He didn't say we have some character. He said we have no character. And so Asa Hilliard, Mama Rumba says it all the time, to be African. If you're not being African, then you're not existing. And when we're looking at complementary relationships, then it has to be framed within an African context, no matter what's going on around us. Now, part of the approach that we have to have in Western society, in terms of complementary relationships, because we know that it's difficult. Well, I always say when I'm talking to groups of people where there are complements in there, or people who are moving into complementary relationships, and I say, we have to seriously applaud those individuals who have chosen a complementary path, because it is getting more and more difficult, number one, for you to be African in the Western society. So I'm really even applauding even more those individuals who walk in the direction of being African, and it's because it's more difficult now to be African than it was 20 years ago. But I really applaud those people who've chosen to be African, because they, whether they know it or not, they're walking out onto a firing line and they're surviving the assault. They're scaring the living daylights out of enemies. What does it take for a person, one single individual, a man or a woman, by themselves, to confront madness, to confront, an overwhelming assault against his or her being, to risk their own death, which is what you do when you go against the Western way, when you choose to be African. What does it take for someone to be willing to risk death to be African in this insanity? And then, what does it take for two people, both of them who have taken this path, what does it take for the two of them to choose to become even more assaulted by this insanity, by coming together in a reality that hates African complementarity, that does everything in its power to destroy the relationships, any positive relationships that exist between African men and African women? What kind of strength does it take to choose to do that, in addition to the difficulty of just the marriage itself? But you're choosing to fight against a people, a reality that is attempting to murder, to remove you and your people from existence, from memory. And then you go to the next level. The two of you who have come together under this assault, in the face of overwhelming danger, you decide that you want to procreate, that you want to have children who this system is going to attempt to destroy with all of its might. And you have sworn, you have taken an oath to the ancestors, to the Creator, to the deity, to divinity. You've taken an oath that you are going to keep them at the center of your existence, because you're African and African people are family and child-centered. You've taken that oath. You've made that promise. Okay, so what kind of a sacrifice, what kind of inspiration, vision, what kind of a real sense of victory does it take to become complements on the front line? And I do say on the front line because we are at war. We're at war for the sanity and survival of our people, period. And those who are listening to this discussion, I'm assuming that they recognize that they're at war, or they wouldn't be listening to me. They probably wouldn't be listening to you. So they have to have some idea that there's an assault that's on, and they're the prey. So complementary couples have to have some basic rules or basic understanding or basic agreements. And for me, there are four of what I call the politics of complementarity in war for African people. And these are things that they have to know and they have to agree on. To me, they have to agree on these things, or they don't know that they're at war, and they're not going to be together for long in all probability. It's going to be chaos. Enia and I have seen too many complementary couples come together and fall apart over the years. We have seen there's been some painful breakups because these people were major icons, if you will, in the community, particularly at the younger ages, and everybody looked at them, and their divorce affected hundreds of people, children beneath them, who became guided in the direction of not wanting to have to deal with that kind of relationship between people. So we have to understand the state of war that we are in, or you're going to get tripped. It's like any game that you play, anything that you do where there's competition, where there's opposition. If they know your game and their game, but you only know your game, then more than likely you're going to lose. So if we recognize that we're at war, then we understand what we're trying to do. We understand what they're trying to do, and the probability of us being successful at what we're trying to do increases dramatically. But if we don't understand what they're trying to do, if we don't understand that they're trying to remove us from existence, then in all probability, we're going to fail at what we do. So in terms of the politics of complementarity, both individuals, not just one, and again, on that point, we see a lot of couples who are coming together where he and she are really in two different realities relative to being at war. And the vast majority of these don't work. It's not us wishing that they don't work. It's that they don't work because people keep moving along a path. They don't stay where they're at when they meet each other. They continue to move along that path. And a person who recognizes and understands and believes that we're at war moves in that direction. But another person who wants to, say, get along or is in denial about the fact that we're at war, pretty soon they're going to that equal yoke, that yoke that's holding them together, if you will, it's going to stretch to the point where it breaks. We've seen that too many times, and not just young folks. We've seen that happen to some of the elders in the quote-unquote conscious community. So the politics of complementarity, again, four things. Both people must know their enemy. They must be clear. They must be in agreement on who the enemy is. So you can't have one person who is clear that Urugu is the enemy and you don't want to have that individual or those people in your space and another person who has some white friends. That's not going to work out well. Both of them have to have a common understanding of the concept of enemy and who that describes. They both have to believe in rearing African children. And we distinguish between, or we use Marie Evans, distinction between rearing and raising. Marie Evans, for those who don't know, she is an incredible poet who wrote a poem called Speak the Truth to the People. If you haven't heard it before, it should be somewhere online. But that poem is on my wall. It's called Speak the Truth to the People, and I think it's a phenomenal piece. But anyway, she made a distinction between rearing and raising children, where raising children simply means, if you will, providing them with food, shelter, clothing, taking them to soccer practice, getting them whatever it is that the other children have. Rearing is about the business also of providing for children's needs, food, shelter, clothing, transportation, all the rest of that. But Rearing also distinguishes between wants and needs. So the child who is raised, they have, I would say, probably all of their needs supplied for, but they also have the bulk of their wants supplied for, and there is no real sense of discipline in their lives relative to distinguishing between wants from needs, which, of course, has a negative impact when they become adults. Rearing, the distinction is clear, and all the child's wants are not supplied for, whether they're able to or not, because there is the need to develop a sense of discipline where the child has to learn that everything that he or she wants, they can't and they shouldn't have. But the most important aspect of rearing is that the child is taught about their power, the politics of their story and the people who they're dealing with, and the responsibility of them for them to use that power to the benefit of their people. So we say complementary pairs, both individuals must believe in rearing African children, not just raising them, but in rearing African children also. Number 3, both individuals must humbly accept a worker role. It can't be these egos where I have to be seen. And that, of course, to me, brings up a lot of the things that are going on now in terms of our tradition, because in our tradition, you as a leader, if you will, was determined primarily based upon the relationships that you had in your family. So that was a measurement of a good leader in our traditions. Versus now, you can be somebody who beats your wife or beats your husband when you're off camera, and then when you're on camera, you can be very eloquent, and everybody will only see that or don't want to hear about the other part. That's not part of our tradition. Isn't that contradiction in terms of that? And in our tradition, leadership was not a singular male thing. Women held an enormous amount of decision-making power in the politics of traditional African society. So to me, if we're coming back, if we're trying to bring back our tradition, we need to get away from this single male in particular leadership model where he can do anything, anywhere. It doesn't make a difference as long as he's a little eloquent, as long as he is charismatic, as long as he can convince people of whatever it is that he's saying and can hold their attention for a while, then he's considered to be a leader. We need to move back to a leadership that is a leadership of family, where even though she may be the one who is the best speaker, she's not separable from him. And a lot of the judgment about her ability to lead, the determination of her ability to lead, is based upon the relationship that she has with her family. That's one of the reasons why I have so much respect for Malcolm, his relationship with Betty. He didn't take the battle home. That stayed outside. That didn't enter into their home. That didn't touch their daughters. That didn't touch the children. That's kept outside. And that was understood, and everybody saw that. We have so much hiding today in this individual leadership that is not accountable to the community. If we want accountability, then we have to return to an African model. Accountability means that you feel responsible. You feel connected to your people. And the first demonstration of that in our tradition is complementarity and family. And the same thing, I say the same thing when I'm talking to young folks about counseling, because everybody's not a good counselor for everybody. But I tell them, if you're talking about counseling for marriage, then you need to find elders, not olders. Young folks distinguish between those two. Elders being folks who are just old, usually Negroes, lost souls. Elders are people who have committed themselves and demonstrated their commitment to African people over their life since awakening, because most folks were not born conscious and were not born into conscious families or communities. That was something that they had to come into of their own. So from the point of consciousnness, they have demonstrated this. So those people we call elders. So when we're talking about counseling in relationships, which should be fairly frequent, you need to be talking to the elders once a month or once every 2 months or once every 3 months at the latest. And that's sad. Another part of that is that a lot of times when we get to counsel couples is too late because the issue has grown to the last minute when it could have been resolved or resolution set in motion earlier if they had talked to us earlier. And we're not elders, we're elders in training, but the same point prevails. And I tell them when you, in terms of the counseling that you should have as a couple, and if you don't think that you need counseling because you got everything down pat, wait a few months. The counseling that you need, should have, and deserve so that you can make this work from the community as a couple should come through an elder complementary pair, not from an elder man who has never been married and has no intention, or elder or woman who has never been married and doesn't want to be married. I can see from an elder who is widowed or a widower and was married for quite a while, so they understand the experience of marriage. Because in counseling, you should have the idea, the sense of goodness, badness, fairness, et cetera, from the woman and from the man. It shouldn't be one-sided, and that's what a lot of people are getting. Not only in marriage counseling, but as I just mentioned, in leadership, there's an imbalance there, a major imbalance there. And the last thing that I argue that warrior complements need to believe in, need to know, need to act on themselves is that they prize a victorious vision, that they believe that we can and are winning. And in fact, years ago, elder would compliment me, and I say, "Yeah, we're trying." And I would get just not slapped in the face literally, but they say, "No, don't say that you're trying. You are doing it. It's being done. Say, I am doing it." So we should say that we are winning. Okay? Complementary couples need to say that, need to know that, need to affirm that on a daily basis. I say all the time when the best motivational speakers I've ever heard, and I really don't have any interest in them personally, but the best motivational speakers I've heard, they will tell you not to talk about what you want, not to talk about things that you aspire to or want to affirm in terms of what you want. You affirm that they already exist. You don't say, "I want to be a doctor." You say, "I am a doctor," because your brain, your mind, is your employee, and your employee receives instruction from you. So the stronger the affirmation, then the greater the probability that your mind is going to find a way to get you to that. So we have to affirm, or complementary couples have to affirm that we're already victorious, that we've already won, that it's not a possibility. It's a done deal. It is a done deal.
That's powerful.
Thank you.
That is powerful. All of that. I had so many questions, and it seemed like you answered them all because you were so thorough.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Mukajara. Mukajara, do we have any people on the line already that may have some questions?
We don't have. We had a question, but I don't see. Let's see. I see one in the chat room, and the question is it possible to rebuild a relationship that is more complementary? So if people are already in a relationship, how can they make it more complementary? I think that's what she's asking.
Okay. Now, I have two things, really. One of them, which I think is critical in the West, is that we not only stop using the word romance, but we redefine that along African lines. I wrote an essay in my book, Clarity, which came out earlier this year, and the essay in the book is entitled Krokro. It's pronounced Krokro. And that's a tree word that reflects the African idea of what is being named romance. Of course, the word romance does fit the Europeans' reality in terms of that game. but we have to take it to a different level. And I really don't want to get into that. I want people to read, because there are certain things that are complete thought, and they have to be understood in the complete thought that they are, and that essay is a complete thought. However, I have things that I think are beneficial, and whenever I'm doing a complementarity lecture, I'll go over this list, because I found, and I assume that there's bound to be one or two things, and like people want to sometimes they want to change things so rapidly, and we have to understand that change takes time. If somebody has been the way that they have been for 30, 40, 50 years, then the change is not going to be overnight. As our Kemetic ancestors would say, if the reed is bent in the wrong direction, it has to be even bent in the other direction in order for it to become straight. So we have to understand the time factor, that change takes time within relationships, and we have to be willing to wait for that. And the measurement needs to be not how much change has occurred, but whether any change has occurred in that direction, because it takes a lot for anybody to make the change, even when they recognize that they're wrong or that it's flawed. So for me, it's like you take one of these things, or take two of these things, and just focus on those. I give the example, and this is real quick. I always give the example of I was on drugs, and when I drank alcohol, and when I smoked cigarettes, and when I did all kinds of other stupid things. When I wanted to change my life, I already understood that if I tried to attack all of those bad things at one time, I was bound to fail. And when I failed, I was going to be in a worse condition. So what I did was I identified that thing which was the worst of the habit, and I attacked it, and I beat it, and the other ones fell, if you will, like dominoes. However, when you're talking about the relationship between two people, when it's not just you fighting this battle, I would suggest that you look at some of the smaller issues, and the question wasn't necessarily about there being issues, but about moving forward. But to me, I look at them as issues because most of them would not exist if we weren't in this culture, in this society, hadn't been socialized in this insanity. We would have a different approach to what relationships were from the get. So I will begin to go down this list, and again, stop me when you will. And I'm not. In fact, I'm just going to read off this list. I may explain a few, but very few. So I call these compliments ground rules. Things that we need to work on. Things that are foundation of our relationship. Righteously praise each other. That tends to die out not too long after the relationship begins. And a lot of times that's the case because we put on this facade. We put on this fake face. We want people to see us in a particular light. We want people to see us in the best of light. And then once people get comfortable, they put down those shields, those walls, and people begin to see us for what we are. We stop realizing the absolute value of that person to us, and we stop praising them righteously. Not just praising them to be praising them, like I hear so many people tell their children 40,000 times a day, I love you, but their behavior indicates something completely different, but righteously praising each other. Do your fair share of work. Consider that. Doesn't mean that you have to put in the same amount of hours. It just means in terms of value to yourself and to the other person. It's like reciprocity. It's not necessarily going to come back in the same amount or in the same form, but it should come back with the same value. Accept responsibility for keeping peace in and maintaining the integrity of the complementary relationship in the family. If each person takes full responsibility for their complementary relationship, if each person takes full responsibility for their complementary relationship, for maintaining, for it being sustained, for it being good, then I think you've already won. Do not use derogatory words against each other. Never speak to each other in hot anger. That's one of the oracles, not oracles of my eye. Yes, it is. It's one of the oracles of my eye, where the term hot anger is used. Because hot anger means that your thinking has been disconnected from your mouth and you're just saying stuff in a rage, stuff that in all probability you're going to live to regret. Didn't say don't speak in anger, because you're talking about two people who are very different from each other, and they're going to have disagreements. There's a couple that doesn't have disagreements, and you're going to them, no, run in terms of advice, because something is horribly wrong. Somebody is probably seriously suppressed in that relationship. People who are different, they have disagreements. Friends have disagreements. Complementary relationships are even closer than that. Also, defend each other. That has been the number one complaint, I think, that I have heard from sisters, relatives, to brothers who are their compliments. It didn't have to be anything physical, fight or anything like that. They just didn't feel that this particular brother had their back the way that he should have. So we need to defend each other. We can talk about it later, but we defend each other in the face of a threat. Africanize your home. If you try to be African, if you're being African, then everything around you should reflect that. Be kind and courteous toward each other every time an opportunity avails itself. Every time you're able to, be kind. Be courteous toward each other. Develop personal and family mission statements. Multiple things that, and there's a copy of a mission statement in Complimentarity we're around page 70, somewhere around there, where you list those things that you're supposed to be about as compliments. You list those things that you're supposed to be about as family. Individuals should have mission statements, and you read it as you can. Might be once a day, might be once a week, might be once a month, but you should read it fairly regularly to remind yourself about what you're supposed to be about, the same way that your name is supposed to remind you of what you're supposed to be about. Never use physical violence against each other. That's male and female. Never use physical violence against each other. Walk away or run away. Never use physical violence against each other. Do not use drugs. Never make unilateral decisions whose outcome affect both of you. I made that mistake one time, and I really didn't realize the damage that I was doing. But I made a decision that affected her as much as it was going to affect me, and I made it without consulting her, and that's a major, major no-no in relationships. You don't make decisions that affect both of us, and you need to consider the decisions that you make for yourself in terms of its effect on the other person, since you are a complementary pair now. Sincerely apologize for wrongs committed, no matter how small or insignificant they may appear to you. People see things differently, and what may be insignificant, unaffecting to you may tear the other person apart. You have to. But when you're wrong, if you know that you are wrong, then you should apologize for that. I'm not in agreement with some people who say that you should apologize even when you not know that when you are not wrong. I think you should understand, but I don't think that you should apologize when you are not wrong, because then that person's when they find out that that's a lie, then they're not going to believe any of your apologies.
Mhm. That's a good
so
one.
I don't buy that.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I really do appreciate that list, and it's in the book.
Yes, that's in Complimentarity, and it's in that Crow essay. No, it's not in the, yes, it's in both. It's in both.
Okay. So we do have another question.
Okay.
And brother is asking, how can a young African brother awaken a sister to understand real complementary African love? And also, I would love for you to
let our listeners know where they can get the book as well.
All right. Well, I can do that first because that's quick. You can go to our site, which is www.akaben, AKOBENHOUSE.com, akabenhouse.com. All of our books are listed there. If you don't remember that, then I'm on Facebook, my page, Baba Mwalimu Baruti, or my other page, Mwalimu Baruti. Just reach out, or Ya Baruti. You can reach out to her. That's easy. But our site is www.akaben, AKOBENHOUSE.com. And all of the books, all of our DVDs that are available are there. In fact, all of my books are available there except for the chess primer, which is being worked on now. In terms of awakening, and I'm glad this is a brother asking this question, because that would be much more difficult for me to ask in terms of a sister trying to wake up a brother, if you will. Because in my opinion, even though this doesn't apply in all areas, for this particular thing, sisters are easier. I've had so many questions. I've had that question asked so many times over the last 10 years, it's not funny. And I've really come to the conclusion, based upon my wife, based upon other sisters who I have known, based upon other compliment couples I've come to know, is that it's not something that you want to try to force. Sisters tend to take longer to want to incorporate the principles because of the need for security in these new ideas. So it's like, I'm not going to let go of what I have to grab hold of this until I am sure or beyond sure that this will sustain me, that this will keep me up, that this will do. Brothers are more quick in terms of jumping from one philosophy, if you will, to another. Sisters are a lot more cautious about that. So what I have seen work, and of course the final decision is hers, is that you, knowing her, knowing what she is receptive to, give her bits and pieces. And what it says, the word said, deliver the word. Give her bits and pieces and let her make up her mind. And what I have found is that those sisters who are serious, who have that interest and want to walk in that direction, once they decide, once they choose, then they begin to outpace the brother in terms of accumulating the information and the understanding and the knowledge. But it's like this, it's not something can be spoon-fed, pass on a DVD, pass on a YouTube clip, pass on a book, pass on a copy of Complimentarity. That's been done on a number of occasions. And when they sit down and read it and decide for themselves that this makes sense, then it's good. But the worst scenarios that I have seen is trying to force it, being angry or upset, or not being happy with the pace at which the change is occurring. Those things tend to seriously backfire. So it's bits and pieces. Bits and pieces. Same thing is just guys are a little bit different. Well, they're a lot different.
Yes, I can say I've seen some cases of people trying to pull others along, and if they don't want to do it for themselves, it seems like it just doesn't stick.
True.
So, yeah, I'm glad you said that. Don't force it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot more difficult for sisters because their connection to family tends to be greater also. So the feeling and the opinion of uncles, aunts, moms, whoever, that tends to be stronger. So usually those aren't necessarily for it. So it can be, those are seriously considered.
And do you offer marriage counseling to others?
Yes, we do. We don't have training in this area, but like most other things, I mean, I'm sure that most of the folks in traditional African society and most of the elders that we talk to don't have training in it. We have the experience of 30 years of marriage, and that's what we offer. And when something is beyond what we're capable of dealing with, we know professionals who are African-centered, who can hold the conversations with couples. But yes, we have been. In fact, we had a reading. I can't remember how many years ago it was. I think it was either 6 years or 7 years ago. We had a reading that said that was going to be one of our responsibilities, and I didn't mean to, but I somewhat scoffed at the idea. But the next year, we started receiving requests for counseling. Of course, we explained to the people, this isn't, we're not trained in this area. This isn't, we don't have any experience in it. But folks seem to benefit from our years together. I'm assuming just like they benefit from anyone else's years together if they've been together for a while in terms of the experience. And what we have found is that most of the problems that people bring to us, they really feel like it's only their problem. And they often don't understand until examples are brought up and the discussion is held that the problems that they're having are very similar to the problems that other, complementary couples have and have had over the years. And that allows for the introduction of options, choices, methods for resolution or reducing the impact of those problems. So yes, we do. This year alone, we have counseled, I believe, 6 or 7 different couples. So and it's fun to us. To be able to assist, and it's almost like you said, you look back and it helps us, because then we have to rethink some of the things that we're dealing with.
Yes, that's beautiful that you all are sharing, and I would say 30 years of marriage is a lot of training.
Well,
a lot more than others to offer. So, and how will people contact you? Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
No, that's quite all right. They can contact me on Facebook or Iniya on Facebook. They can email me. It's easier for me. It's easier. I can always respond easier to emails. And my email address is my first and last name, Mwalimu Baruti @yahoo.com, and I spell that MWALIMUBARUTI @yahoo.com. My first and last name @yahoo.com. Iniya's email address is Baruti, YAA Baruti @yahoo.com. And for Iniya, she prefers where she deals with the phone better in some cases. So you can call her at 404-753-7237. But folks have to bear in mind when they call or when they email, this is a very busy life. So if we don't respond immediately, have a little patience with us.
All right. Good. Thanks. And I'm sure there are some people out there who are interested. I do some counseling myself for relationships, and it is a big thing. Yes, it's a big thing. I see young people especially have difficulty in their relationships. There's a lot of violence going on. And, I really think they need guidance overall. And so that suggestion that you made getting the counseling or talking to the elders once a month at least. I really like that because, you know, that's what the elders are there for, is that guidance. And they have that experience, and, you know, the young people need that. So we salute you for offering that. And is there, you have another book coming out too, right?
Well, that one, African Center Education, I'm working on that now. I'm hoping to have that out by June of this year. I don't know if I'm going to make the deadline. I'm working on it hard. But that I'm seeing a lot of people who are trying to homeschool, who are trying to start their own institutions, and I wanted to have a little input into that also. And I also want to say, because like you said, you do counseling also. We have those of us who do this, especially the elders who do this, have to realize that this takes time from them, which it should. But there should be, and it doesn't have to be dollar amounts per se, but the things that they can't do with the time that they spend counseling need to be taken care of. So when you're seeking out counseling from an elder or really anybody else in the community, then there needs to be some reciprocity in some way, shape, form, or fashion, because it's like the other things in their lives don't stop just because an emergency situation, and those occur, come up. Mm-hmm. So that time, to the best of the ability, needs to find some balance. I've seen at least 3 elders get worn out by being called on by people in the community who had serious things that had to be dealt with. But the things that the elders had to stop doing or do late, if you will, because they understood the urgency of the situations, those things didn't get done, and they wore themselves out trying to do both. So for folks, I ask folks earnestly to give that some thought as they're calling on people for assistance, guidance, etc.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that, because it does happen so often. And people don't realize when you stop and take that time, you know, it's some energy. And, you know, it definitely, we appreciate having something in return for that energy. We do have a caller with a question. Okay. So if you don't mind, I will bring them in. And this is caller 512. Peace and love. Can you hear us? Welcome to the call.
Yes. Greetings, Mukajara. This is Dr. Afiki Adiro. And thank you so much. And greetings to you too, Baba Mwalimu Baruti. Like, thank you for this information. This is so wonderful. I give thanks. So my question, and you answered a lot of my questions. I had a bunch of questions also. The question that I have is regarding complementary warrior couples having access to elders. Do you recommend, I know you said that we should be speaking with those elders at least once a month, at least. Do you think it's important for complementary warrior couples to live around these elders? Like, for example, if there's a couple that, you know, is going to move somewhere, is that like something they should consider when they're moving to a different place? Like, should they seek out there's like a community that's already established with elders that they can consult, you know, so that once they get into the family creating of their own, and, you know, as they go on in their marriage, that they have this community? Or is it more important just to talk to them no matter where they're at? Is that not something that we should seek out, you know, and try to move closer to these elders?
Okay. I would say ideally, yes. You should be close to them. If you relocate, you should relocate to an area that's near to them. And not just for the counseling, but for the point that I was just making about assisting them. One of the things that I see when disasters occur, the often the elders aren't the first people who are grabbed and made safe. Mm-hmm. So, and if people aren't close to them, if young folks who depend on them, if you will, for advice aren't close to them, then those elders can get lost, and then there are no elders to talk to. Ideally, yes. But from having traveled a whole bunch of places, I see a lot of places where there are quite a few elders but no elders.
Right.
And I constantly hear people complaining about that. So there to me, there are multiple ways to approach this. One is to, and in fact, about half of the counseling we do is on the phone. So, I mean, New Jersey, we're in Atlanta, so we counsel folks in New Jersey, New York, Chicago, other places. So you don't. It's nice if you are there that you can sit down and have those conversations because they're easier, of course, more relaxed, and there tends to be more. The phone conversations tend to be more strained than the conversations when you are there and you can look people in the eye and have, conversation in a glass of water. Well, if you ask me what needs to be done, there needs to be, first, warriors nationally and also globally, but nationally and regionally, need to establish elders' councils. And I don't think that can be done without the warriors deciding who these elders are and then creating a council out of them, because I can't imagine serious elders rejecting that. Within that construct, then you have, for folks who don't know any elders, they have access to some elders. Now, I imagine there are a lot of complementary pairs who are not in spaces where they're elders and they really don't know who to talk to. They don't know who to reach out to. So the establishment of elders, regional elders councils, could be beneficial, not only because those elders will be available, but those elders should know other elders who have the time or expertise in particular areas who can better assist with that. But again, ideally, be as close as you can. But for most warriors, that's probably not going to be the case right now. There are issues with elders too. But for those folks who it is regular on, the phone is not an issue because the problems aren't building up for 3 or 4 months before resolution is sought. So it's the regular communication that is allowing problems not to grow all out of proportion. Okay?
Yes. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
All right. Thank you, Mukajara.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for calling in. It's good to hear your voice.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
we just have a few minutes left, so if there is anything that you would like to share with our listeners before we close, Baba, I want to give you that opportunity.
Okay. Well, my most favorite piece of advice to warriors who are looking for a compliment, and that may be the biggest issue that Enia and I have seen over the years. Complaints from brothers can't find a good sister, complaints from sisters they can't find a good brother, and complaints coming from people who are serious workers. And our advice is always, do your work. If you do your work, then you'll find your compliment. And the main reason I would say that is because if you're looking for somebody who is a serious warrior, then they should be doing the work, and that should be where you see them. That should be where you find them. So even though that may seem oversimplified piece of advice, I say do your work, and you will find your mate, or you'll find each other. So I guess 2 other things. One which was advice that I gave to my daughter. I give to brothers now, and I especially give to sisters, is do not settle. We find a number of people that creates major problems later. Do not settle for less. That doesn't mean that you have such high standards that nobody can fit them, but they should be reasonable, and there should be certain things that you don't compromise on. But don't settle. Don't settle. Search for potential. If the person isn't evident or isn't where you would like them to be right now, then assess their potential. See whether their potential will take them there, and if their vision is taking them there. Like if some guy wanted to date our daughter, I would essentially have two questions for him. What do you want to be? What do you want to be? When you grow up, if you will. And they tell me that. And my second question would be, what are you doing now relative to getting there? And his answer to the second would determine a lot. So if the person may not be there or may not be to that point in terms of your requirements for a compliment, but there should be some indicator of the potential for them to do so, and they're moving in that direction. That is not to say, and this isn't advice for people who are just looking for somebody who has power, which I've seen quite a bit of among people pretending consciousness, and they would come into the conscious community because they recognize the power within there, and they would look for somebody who has the kind of power that they want, and they would pretend that they were conscious until they could get the person away with the idea that they could turn that person into a lost soul or a Negro, but the power would remain. We can't play those games. We don't have time for those games anymore. This is way too serious, and don't try. And this may, I guess this may sound a little pessimistic, but it's not. We know a sister who did her work for a long time. I knew her since at the time that I published my first book. And she did her work, and she kept her options open, and she did her work, and she did her work, and she did her work, and she was married about 2 years ago because she finally found that person doing that work. And that was a long time, and that was painful for her, all of those years. But she had requirements that were not unreasonable, but she wasn't in the right place. And now she's quite happy. We're really happy for her. Very, very happy for her. And
I said that's very inspiring.
Yes, it is. She's a beautiful person, and so is he.
All right.
The last thing I would say, and I'm going to speak for NEI. I'm not supposed to speak to her, but I'm going to speak for NEI. Read Complimentarity. She's an extremely big advocate of my book Complimentarity. She's an extremely big advocate, and I, of course, I'm going to say read Complimentarity and also read the essay Crocro in my book Clarity, because I didn't have the idea at the time that I wrote Complimentarity, but this would have been a chapter in Complimentarity if it had been, because they pretty much go together. So read Complimentarity, and I want to close saying Madasi P for having me on. It's hard to because people can be so in honor of you for your work, and I appreciate that, but sometimes I respond to people and comply with their requests because of how I see them. This is an extremely busy time of the year for us. I just did the K-Buka lecture. We have Straight Black Pride on Saturday. I just came back from Fort Lauderdale. I'm not really into all that much traveling. For the last 2 months, it's been every weekend of some event. And NEI was sick for a good part of last week, so I've been doing the school thing, getting ready for winter. So this time of the year, I try very hard not to accept interviews or discussions online. But I didn't even think about this for half a second, because I honor the work you do. I honor your spirit. My sister now, the doula, she has me inspired because of what she was able to see. So this was extremely enjoyable to me, and I appreciate being invited on the program. Being in the presence of people whose character I appreciate and respect.
Do I bow humbly before you, and I thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared. I didn't want to interrupt you because you were flowing.
I appreciate that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we salute you for the work that you're doing and for the people that you are raising up and touching and, reaching out for their ancestors with that holy day. We give thanks, Baba.
Yeah.
You are definitely one of those great fathers who will be remembered and honored for many years to come. And for everyone who is listening, make sure you go to Afrikanb.com and get the book, Complimentarity, as well as the other books, because all of them are excellent works. I had to get a couple of them for my children, and, before I could even pass them on, I said, let me just read these first. So, yes, it has been, such a beautiful time. I know my sisters also might want to say something as well before we close, so I don't want to take up all the time, but we love you and thank you, and we love Mama NEI. We pray you're feeling good.
And I will tell her.
All right,
I'm just really, truly grateful for you and your presence and all that you do. Our community needs your wisdom and just the insight that flows through you. And I am really, truly grateful for just the opportunity to listen to you and to have those questions answered, because with the work that I do work with families. And now it's coming into that I'm working with multiple generations in families. And it is all about building strong families so that our people can be strong. So I say to your spirit, I'm truly, truly honored. And I was just taking a whole bunch of notes. And I definitely recommend for our family, our extended family, to share this episode, this show with your friends. It will be in the archives. I'm going to be sharing it even more because I really, truly believe that this message needs to get out for the betterment of our people and the upliftment of our race. So I'm truly grateful. Thank you.
Madasi, you are.
Peace. Dua, Baba, for a beautiful show. Yeah. Thank you for opening up with your wisdom. I, too, was taking notes, and the points that you brought up were very valuable, and I will be going back and listening to this episode. And I give thanks to you and your wife and for all the work that you do. And I am interested in, at some point, in coming up to Atlanta and receiving some wisdom with you guys one-on-one with my mate. It should be exciting.
we will be here. We will be here. Appreciate Madasi P. and BB Fauria.
Yes, Madasi. And we are running out of time, but we thank everyone for joining in. We encourage everyone to listen in. Next week, we are going to be doing a show to support Black business. We are boycotting for the next few months. So if everyone would join in and tell everyone about this show, we're going to have some Black businesses on that we can operate and work with. I'm tongue-tied right now. But anyway, Also, visit us online at RasekiStore.com and RasekiHealing.com. And until the next time, Uncle Jasaneb, much love and blessings to you all. Hetepu.
Hetepu. Uncle Jasaneb. Uncle Jasaneb.
It was a good show. Black love. Woo!
Uncle Jasaneb. 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 Uncle Jasaneb.
Skydiving. This is amazing. Yeah, but you know what else is amazing? An iPhone 6S for just $49 at Metro. Really? Imagine streaming all the way down with that amazing camera. I'm switching. That's smart. You know what else is smart? Parachutes. Woo!
Switch to Metro and get an amazing iPhone 6S for only $49. Metro by T-Mobile. Phone offer requires port-in of number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Skydiving. This is amazing. Yeah, but you know what else is amazing? An iPhone 6S for just $49 at Metro. Really? Imagine streaming all the way down with that amazing camera. I'm switching. That's smart. You know what else is smart? Parachutes. Woo!
Switch to Metro and get an amazing iPhone 6S for only $49. Metro by T-Mobile. Phone offer requires port-in of number not currently active on T-Mobile network or active on Metro in past 90 days. See store for details and terms and conditions.